The snow had turned black from the fires, and still they kept coming. A young driver squints through a rim of ice on a periscope as the Kharkov road becomes a churned throat of mud. The engine under his belly is a living thing, its heat a thin mercy in a frozen world. This is how the story of the Soviet heavy tank begins, not with a blueprint or a statistic, but with a man pressed into metal and steel, riding toward objectives that the commanders had named and the maps had not. From the early fright of the first KV machines to the thunder of the IS-2, every advance was an argument about survival. Could men and metal hold the line long enough to be remade into something that could break through? The KV-1 arrived like a promise. Its armor caught shells that had chewed through lighter machines, and for a time it walked across the battlefield like an apparition of invulnerability. Crews learned quickly that this apparent invincibility carried its own cost. The hull was a furnace, interiors fouled by fumes, and sometimes a bite from the transmission would leave a tank stranded with tracks buried in mud. Still, the sight of a KV-1 pushing a ruined village, taking hits and refusing to fall, altered the courage of nearby infantry. One hidden truth is that the KV-1 bought much more than tactical ground. Its presence bought time for commanders and hope for soldiers who had been shown nothing but retreat. German units detoured and hesitated in its shadow, and those pauses mattered. The prototypes that followed chained themselves to an idea. Armor was not merely to stop around, it was a statement to the enemy that you would not yield. But weight is lawless in mud, and bridges are indifferent. So the Soviet engineers and crews entered a daily negotiation with gravity. The problems that crippled the KV-1 seeded adaptations. Suspension was reworked, engines were pushed and replaced by robust diesels that tolerated Soviet fuel and winter. Crews taught one another tricks to keep turrets turning and radios speaking. Another hidden gem here is the improvisation of the rank and file, who ritualized maintenance as much as any order, forever fighting rust, cold, and impatience in equal measure. Momentum carried them to the heavy butchering fields of mid-war battles where the T-34 had already made its name but still needed heft to crack fortified lines. The machine that emerged after hard lessons looked different. Longer barrels, thicker plates, guns meant not only to stop enemy tanks but to punch through concrete. The IS series, named for the marshal whose name men spoke in reverent whispers, was born in that logic. The IS-2 was conceived to extinguish the Tiger I and the Panther at ranges where the older guns failed. Here, a second hidden gem appears. The IS-2 used a separate charged shell system for its main gun, a design that slowed the firing rhythm yet concentrated destructive power into each shot. Crews learned to live with that tempo, measured, deliberate, because every round was a decision. There came an unexpected revelation at the heart of this evolution. The heavy tank's real victory was not always measured by numbers of enemy tanks destroyed. The aha moment arrived quietly when commanders on both sides began altering entire battle plans because of them. German commanders diverted armor, retooled ammunition factories, and shifted anti-tank artillery to counter what they perceived as a new kind of unavoidable threat. Each heavy Soviet tank that lumbered forward forced strategic accounting at a higher level. In a war of attrition, forcing the enemy to change was often the nearest thing to victory. That truth flipped the way one thought about armor. The tank that mattered most was sometimes the one that bent the enemy's resources around it. The narrative pressure tightened as production ramps and battlefield sacrifices collided. The factories in the Urals and the Volga region pumped out hulls and turrets under threat of air raids, and men came down from workshops to learn how to handle the beasts they had forged. Another lesser-known fact is the degree to which simplified design choices accelerated deliveries at a terrible human cost. Crews received vehicles with thinner training manuals and outdated maps, and often learned tactics amidst the clatter of battle. The IS-2, heavy and purposeful, arrived in numbers just as the Red Army prepared for its final continental push. By then, crews had perfected the ritual of firing a round that could pierce a tiger's frontal armor, of smelling the sharp ozone after each recoil, of shouting over the roar as the turret slewed. The climax unfolds in an urban tableau of concrete and smoke. Berlin, street after street, where metal meets masonry. Anne is two halts at an intersection, its commander peering through a slit, ears still ringing from previous volleys. The gun fires, and the recoil shakes the crew from cheek to shoulder. Window glass rains down like silver snow. Infantry press their faces to the tank's flanks, using the vehicle as moving cover. Here, everything comes together. The engineering compromises that made production possible. The crew's hard-won drill. The tactical mind that placed heavy tanks where they could open paths for infantry and self-propelled guns. In that moment, the tank is more than machine. It is a pivot on which the battered army swings toward its objective. When the smoke clears and the last of the squares are taken, the cost is tally and silence. Many tanks will not make it home. Many crews never tasted the quiet of a proper sleep again. Yet, the heavy line lives on in the memories of men who crawled out of cramped turrets, and in the fields where farmers still unearth brass casings decades later. The final lesson is plain and sharp. Heavy tanks transformed the calculus of the Eastern Front, not merely by punching holes in enemy armor, but by demanding attention, shaping logistics, forcing industrial shifts, and becoming focal points for courage and fear. Their legacy is a landscape of metal and memory, where the roar of diesel and the smell of cordite still seem close enough to touch. If you enjoyed this, tap like and subscribe. It really helps. And drop a quick comment telling us where you're watching from. The United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world. Your reply helps the video reach more people just like you.